Successful? Okay, right. Please, Jean-Pierre.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for the invitation and for organizing this seminar. It's really a privilege to be here. Let me say immediately that, so this morning this is going to be a philosophy talk. There won't be many technical stuff, although I was really wondering how much I had to go into homotopy types. In fact, I won't. There are things that I'll tell you why in a minute. Then this afternoon, my second talk will be historical. So it's really history that I'll be looked at more carefully. So they're very different talks. I just want to, if you don't like this talk this morning, perhaps this afternoon it's going to be easier. That's what I wanted to tell you. Okay, so just a little bit of the motivation underlying this here. So I've been talking about categorical foundations for a while, and giving talks to philosophers, logicians, and mathematicians who are not necessarily category theorists. And as Colin certainly knows very well, one of the first reactions we have is, oh, so you guys want to get rid of sets. And of course say, not at all. We don't want to get rid of sets. That's not the point. And then people just go blank and say, okay, so what do you want? So what's the point of this? And say, well, we have sets, and they're there, and it's just that we don't treat them in the same way. And then they really, most logicians then really start to puzzle and say, so what are those? I mean, we have a very nice, clear conception of what our sets are. You guys have sets, and we're not sure that we understand what you're doing. And certainly there's got to be something wrong, because our conception of set is really elementary, primitive, it's the simplest, and I can't not think of anything more simple or simpler than that. So you've got to be wrong at some stage. So, all right, fair enough. So what I would like to do, I won't succeed now, but hopefully you'll help me, and that will be an improvement. I would like to answer something like, well, we do have an alternative picture of sets that is just as elementary and just as convincing. But it differs on certain basic things that you just are so used to that you just have to forget about these things, and then you have to start from scratch, so to speak. If you do, then you'll see that the picture we have makes a whole lot of sense. And it's more a geometric picture than what you guys are used to, which is more a logical picture, in some sense. And there's a whole historical thing underlying this that I will sketch very briefly here, but I think I could actually talk more about that. So this is the motivation. Trying to make sense of we have sets, we try to talk about them differently. We use category theory to talk about them. We use the language. But it's not that, and then you say, well, but then the underlying conception of sets, you can't get rid of that. So, okay, well, I'll try. Okay, and I'll see where it leads us. All right, so what I'll do this morning is I'll go over very quickly what I take to be the standard conceptions of sets. There are two here that I want to play with. So there will be the logical conception, and I think this is the one that most people actually have in mind when they start to go towards the foundational stuff, and they think, oh, well, we still have that, and this is really clear and very simple, and it makes a whole lot of sense. And then there's the abstract conception. Historically, this as I will show you, this goes back, in fact, to the early 20th century, which will I call the first version. Then I'll move to what it is to be abstract, and link that to the abstract conception of set. I'll quote certain people, Bill is among them. And then I'll give you my theory of mathematical abstraction. Okay? Then I'll try to explain to you what I mean by this and why I think it deserves to be called abstract. And that differs from the way you use abstract in some important ways. So we'll have to see whether that works out. And then the last part, I'll go to homotopy types, but actually I won't talk a lot about homotopy types. What I'm interested in here is mostly, as I say in my abstract, is the kind of abstractness that homotopy types exhibit is the kind of abstractness we are interested in categorical foundations. Okay? And this is, if you understand that, then there's a picture that is emerging from this, from elementary stuff that you can build on and try to convince mathematicians or logicians that it is an alternative way of thinking about these things. Okay, so whether I succeed or not, I don't know, but I think it's worth trying and look into to just clarify our minds and see where things can go wrong. Okay, so without further ado, let me start. So sets from logic. So I want to go back to Frege, in fact, in this way, because I think he studied it out and we just played with it, changed it so that we can keep the important ideas and so that we would avoid paradoxes. But the idea is very simple and very compelling in some ways, and some people wouldn't agree all the way because it depends on various details. But the basic idea is that if you have a predicate, and I say a predicate, not a property, because I don't know what is a property in general. So here, if you have a language, it's not a predicate, then you can consider the collection of objects that satisfy them. Okay, this is a very simple idea. It gives you a set. But then it gives you a certain conception of what a set is. Okay, and this is really important. This is really at the bottom of the whole thing that I want to clarify. Because such a set is entirely determined by its elements. And the elements entirely determined too. So if you think of the set of all stars, then the stars are definite, concrete individuals, and they are determined by their properties and all this. And the set is entirely determined by these guys. Okay, so you have a very definite thing that you're thinking of. And this is really important from a metaphysical point of view. And I think a lot of philosophers are attracted to this. Now, philosophers will tell you that such a set is abstract in a certain sense. And here what they will do is that they'll say, they will use the standard distinction between being abstract and being concrete. Okay? So such a set is abstract in the sense that it's not perceived directly. It's not causally efficacious in any way. It's not spatial temporal. Although all the elements are, the set itself isn't. So if being concrete is something like that, then such a set is abstract. And of course, any concept, in fact, is abstract in this sense. So it's not specifically mathematically abstract. It's just abstract in a standard metaphysical meaning. Okay? So we don't gain much by saying, oh, it's an abstract concept. It's not. All concepts are abstract. These sets are just a special case of that. And this I find very unsatisfactory. Okay, I just want to say, oh, so sets are abstract in that sense. I want to say more than that. There's not enough. And in fact, there's something missing. So we all know that what we did historically is that, okay, so there are the paradoxes came out very quickly. So to avoid those, we just decided that we would fix the universe of mathematics in dominant numbers, for instance. So it is the axioms that the natural number exists, then there are operations on them, and so we get the whole universe. And then we just do comprehension of that.
But I think that the origin of this concept of universe of discourse comes well before the encounter with these paradoxes. I mean, the idea that the predicate itself has to have a definite domain to start with. So the so-called sets are actually subsets of the domain.
Right, right.
The notion of universal discourse is actually introduced by De Morgan.
De Morgan.
Okay, that may be.
There was a historical talk on this subject in the Congress, which is why.
But I mean, it's not a really important point.
No, okay.
It doesn't change anything about the nature of the sets we're talking about, and this mechanism that I think is really considered basic. But the thing is, even if you introduce a dominant discourse, it doesn't change the nature of us being abstract at all. It's just the same thing.
The nature of being abstract.
So that's the main point I want to make here. I mean, it's not that it changes everything.
It's not about the paradox.
But from a foundational point of view, moving from predicates to sets was seen by a lot of people, I think, as a basic mechanism, as something that is very clear, that is really fundamental, that we understand. Okay, so the logical conception, in some sense, was very appealing, and I guess that's why we kept the axiom of separation. All right, so again, we restrict the universe we want to talk about, but that's not my point. So there was a shift historically, and this is really important because foundationally, from a foundational point of view, I think a lot of logicians actually stick to that. At some point, when the cumulative hierarchy was presented as being a model of the sets of universe that you could construct from very elementary principles. You start with the anti-set, the power set operation, you take the union to the limit, and then you go on like this. And yesterday, I had a discussion with Yanis Matrovakis precisely about that point. He just brought out this cumulative hierarchy, saying, this is so simple and clear. And when you use this and you look at the axioms of ZF, and you interpret the axioms in the cumulative hierarchy, you can see that they are true there in a very natural way. So from his point of view, and he's not the only one actually having this feeling, from his point of view, one of the strengths of set theory, seen this way, is that you have a clear language, the axioms, and you have a cumulative hierarchy. And you know that the axioms make sense in a very simple way, because the cumulative hierarchy is very elementary. You can explain it to first-year students, undergraduates, and they will understand what is going on. It takes a little while to get used to it, but the construction is very easy. So there's something there that is now playing a clear role, convincing logicians that this is simple, clear. It gives us a big picture of what we're talking about and how it works. So it is constructed systematically. What can be, and even the anti-set. That's easy also to explain. You just take a predicate, x is different from x, and you'll get the anti-set. This is very, very basic stuff. Okay? And of course, what happened is, and you've heard this probably, when I get recently, so I tried to talk about homotopy types and stuff like that, and the people at the end of the talk, they would just look at me. Do you seriously believe that this is going to play a role in the foundations of mathematics? Do you seriously believe that homotopy types can be used in the same way as we're using this stuff here to explain the foundations of mathematics? Let's say, well, yes. You've got to be crazy, because algebraic topology and homotopy types and homotopy groups, come on, this is graduate stuff. So let's start undergraduate students, try to explain to them the foundations of mathematics from there. This is easy, and it makes sense. Okay, so you see that's the problem I'm always presented with, or confronting when I talk about this. Okay, so as I said, so the axioms of set theory can be justified. This is very nice. If you've never seen this, there's a paper by Charles Parsons who does that. There's another paper in the Handbook of Mathematical Logic by, what's his name, logician, I forget. Remember calling it? So look at.
It was a genre, though. People wrote these papers.
Yeah. So there was in the 70s. There were 3 or 4 papers. Howland, Charles Parsons, and this other logician.
Like,
Boulos did it also. That's right.
Yeah.
But that's not the one I'm thinking of. In the Handbook of Mathematical Logic, edited by Barwise, the chapter on axiomatic set theory does precisely that. Very clean, very neat. And you read this and say, oh, yeah, that's very nice. That's a very nice way of justifying the axioms of set theory. And it works reasonably well. It works reasonably well. Well, there are problems we know. Okay.
Jean-Pierre,
Yes.
can I make a small interruption here? What you've told so far, so I'm connecting this now to when I teach some of this stuff, how I teach it. And then from the very beginning, I tried to make the students aware that there is a distinction that should not be confused. And that is the distinction between an extension of a predicate, as you have introduced it, and that is the set in mathematics as a sort of a combinatorial entity, and how it arose out of Cantor's work in analysis, and those are really separate things.
Right.
And I have the idea that you're confusing that from the very beginning.
Thank you. No, thank you for bringing this up. I'm not confusing it. Okay. I wanted to start with the logical conception because I think it does, but still play an important role in our when we think about sets and why they would be a convincing way of introducing them as very elementary things that show up in a certain way, in a logicious framework. What I think is when you move to this picture of the cumulative hierarchy, you'll left that behind. Okay, now there's a different picture with this, starting with the empty set that you built. And this is now becoming the extensional point of view that you're refixed. I've moved towards that. Okay? As far as I know, and thank you for this, as far as I know, if you ask a magician what he thinks as, or the standard classical magicians, what's the picture of the foundation he has in mind, he will not use the logical principle at all. He'll just use a cumulative hierarchy, the axioms, the interpretations, and that will be it. Okay, that's the picture I want to have now in mind. Okay, so forget the logical move here, the basic mechanism. Although I think it does play sometimes when you press people, it will come back as something that is very simple, that justifies in some way this idea of sets. In some way. Whether it does play a role in this other picture, I'm not sure it does in fact play an important role, because you use separation there, so it's just placed in that big picture. Okay. But now it's the big picture. It's that picture that I really want to keep in mind. Now the important thing here is that in the cumulative hierarchy, the sets are what I call individuals or particulars. Okay? And that's because the criterion of identity for sets there is the axiom of extensionality. Okay? And that's the key ingredient. Although in practice, when you do mathematics, you're not actually using the axiom of extensionality quite a lot. You're not using it on a day-to-day basis when you do algebra or topology. But in the foundational picture, if you look at what the sets are in the cumulative hierarchy in the principle, the criterion of identity, you'll have the axiom of extensionality. And so two sets are the same when they have the same elements. And that makes the sets of being called particular. Okay, they're just one with these elements. That's it. Okay. So in this context, sets can only be abstract in the ontological sense, the first sense that I mentioned earlier. But they're particulars. They're individuals. They're abstract, but they're particulars. And this, of course, has been brought out by many people at various points in the history, as I will show you in a minute. It clashes with the practice of contemporary mathematics in many ways. This is one of the standard examples that Jim Lambic always brings up when we talk about this. So which set is the Klein 4 group? Okay, so which one? Okay, and so you have to look at the cumulative hierarchy and say, it is that one. And of course, this doesn't make much sense to a mathematician. They say, well, there's something wrong there. If your foundational picture is that, and then the practice is very different from it, so you have to explain the distance between the two. And one would want this distance to be as little as possible. Okay, now, I told you that there was this first notion of sets that is abstract particulars. Now, mathematicians, starting in the early 20th century, started to talk about sets in a rather different way. Okay? And I have Fichet here. This is 1951. I have another quote from 1918, and I can actually go back even to his first papers, so 1906 or 08. No, this one is in English, so that's why.
So you're saying, was this an original publication of Fichet in that year, or
yeah,
this
this is 51. It's in his book, so it's not the original. But I can actually very easily give you a quote from 1918 in French.
Of him?
Of him.
Yeah.
And where he says exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So here's what he says. In modern times it has been recognized that it is possible to elaborate full mathematical theories dealing with elements of which the nature is not specified. That is, with abstract elements. Now he's using the word abstract in a different sense. Okay? Meaning the nature is not specified. A collection of these elements will be called an abstract set.
Or they have no nature.
That's right. Okay, well, it's not
But it's not
specified.
specified.
Well, he says it's not. You have a different view. We'll come to your view in a second. Okay? Hold on a minute. This is going to be interesting. So, what Fréchet says here is that we have elements, they're unspecified nature. Okay? Which means, in contrast with one of the things I was saying, one way of thinking of the cumulative sets in the cumulative hierarchy as abstract particulars is that their elements are specific sets with specific properties. Okay? Now here we have a set with elements, the nature of which we don't know. That's why they're abstract. Now that's a different sense of being abstract that he's using. It's not because it's not spatio-temporally located or causally efficacious or nothing like that. It's just that you look at the elements, you don't see anything. They're just elements. Okay, and you use those in his way.
Jean-Pierre,
Yes.
do you know what motivation Frankel had to call his book on set theory
Abstract set theory. I don't know what was it.
Same
Well,
or-
you probably know more than I do about this. But I don't know. But at this, in those years, everybody was talking about abstract mathematics. In the 20s and 30s, it's just that everybody's just using it.
Yeah, but not, of course, in the same sense.
No,
It's a great
exactly.
deal of
There's a
very
shift.
conflictual,
There's a shift that appears. It's very interesting to see how this word is being used.
a great deal of confusion generated by this.
Yes.
I think one likely thing is it was in reaction to Hausdorff, that this isn't the set theory of topology, and it's certainly not going to be the set theory of functional analysis. This is abstract set theory.
Yeah. And another possibility is set theory without Urelementen.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, that would be. I don't know. That could be also
Pure set
right,
theory.
Well, then it's pure set theory.
Yeah.
Why would you call that abstract? I don't know.
Perhaps that's the
But it was a
terminology of later
abstract
descent.
became a buzzword in
Yes.
the 30s.
Yes.
Further underlining the point, there's a lot of different things going on
Yeah.
around this notion.
Here's a notion of abstract ring, abstract field, abstract groups. These are now clear by 1930 with van der Waalen, Luther, and the others. And then people start to do mathematics from the abstract point of view. Okay? Meaning, in some sense, as I said in my talk, meaning just the axiomatic method. In some cases, that's what they had in mind. So one option here is that Frankel thought we're doing axiomatic set theory. This is the abstract method. Okay, that is another possibility. But Colin might also...
Well, and also, I mean, abstract algebra, which, of course, van der Waalen calls it modern algebra.
Right.
But
But in the first sentence of his book,
yeah, but abstract algebra isn't the algebra of real analysis. It isn't the algebra of complex analysis. It's just algebra. So I think that goes along with saying this is just set theory. It's not the set theory of anything.
so, but I don't know.
By the way, do you mind asking, do you want to take questions and interventions
That's
during the
fine.
talk? You want to leave them to the end?
No, that's fine.
Okay, fine.
All right, so here's another quote from MacLean, coming much later, 67, but I have another quote from MacLean from 1931, which says exactly that. Okay, so this is a constant vein here. So the starting point of this whole development is the systematic use of abstract, here's a nice statement, of abstract and axiomatic methods, so they go hand in hand, as in the modern algebra dedicated in the 1920s, so he's referring to van der Walen's modern algebra. At that time, it became clear that algebra, okay, here's the passage that I want you to concentrate on. At that time, it became clear that algebra deals not primarily with the manipulation of sums and products of numbers, such as rationals, reals, complexes, but with sums and products of elements of any sort. So this is exactly saying the same thing as Fréchet. So we have elements whose nature we don't know, okay? And that was taken to be the difference between what mathematicians were doing before. They were always referring to numbers of certain sorts, and spaces were built up from numbers. But now we're just talking about elements of whatever they are.
What about Hilbert's beer mugs? What year was that?
No, actually, Hilbert,
It's 1900, wasn't it?
yeah, that's your.
Is it that old?
Oh, it's at least that.
But as far as I know, and here I follow Collins on this, and I think he showed this quite convincing. Hilbert never really endorsed that position. For him, the axiomatic method was still a method that you were using
Oh,
to
yes.
clarify the whole
Like the
good old
so-called
standard.
formalism, yes.
Okay, and this is a different standpoint. We're doing something different.
Hilbert seriously meant that as a standard of rigor, you should be able to say.
Yeah,
Should be
but,
able
but
to.
it's not doing abstract mathematics.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's using that method
Yeah.
to clarify things, being more rigorous, but you're still
Yeah.
talking about complex numbers and complex geometry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this is what you're talking about. This is the object of mathematics. You use the axiomatic method, but it's not that you want to introduce abstract entities.
What about Brockland geometry of Hilbert?
No, that's precisely the point. For him, that was just using the axiomatic method to give a clear picture of geometry as it was presented and known in the 19th century.
He
Although-
specifies it's a logical
Yes.
analysis of
It
space.
is a logical analysis of standard conceptions. He's not saying, although there's a beer and mugs and stuff like that,
Yeah.
that suggests that he's willing to talk about it in an abstract manner. He's not. And he's not the only one. So between 1900 and 1930-35, there's a beautiful case of that. I'll mention it in a second. You see mathematicians using the axiomatic method in the, I would say, the classical sense. It's just using it as a rigor, clarification, independence of axioms and stuff like that. And then you have this other trend that was following Fichet and Van der Waal and others, Noether, of course, that you use axioms, but you introduce abstract entities or an abstract method. Okay? And here the real, now this is not the main point of my paper, but
I think it will become clear when we get to the point about abstraction.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which of course you talked about in the previous talk.
okay, so as I said, this is a completely different sense of what it is to be abstract. Sets are still abstract in the ontological sense, but now there's a specific mathematical meaning to the term. Well, specific in the sense that the elements have unspecified properties. Okay, they're just elements. Okay. Notice, and here I want to get back to the logical sets or also the extensional point of view. So the logical sets are not strictly speaking abstract in this sense, and also in the cumulative hierarchy. Okay? So these guys are not abstract in the sense that Fichet is using them. Okay? For the elements of the logical sets and the cumulative hierarchy are not abstract elements. Okay? And I use the property VU star, or if you take a set in the cumulative hierarchy anywhere, this set has rank block, and it's constructed from the empty set, the power set somewhere, and there it is. Okay? And it has these elements. So these elements are, you can actually talk about these elements and their properties. So there's a clash between the way we talk about sets in the foundational picture and the way Fichet and MacLean and the others talk about sets in their practice, in the abstract side. Okay? So the elements of the logical sets are not elements of any sort, and that's true also of the cumulative hierarchy. Okay, extensional point of view. You specify what the elements are. You specify what the elements are with their properties. Okay. So being abstract in this case means having no explicit properties. I said that's pretty clear. All right. Now, if we take Fichet's conception, and we say, now an abstract set is a set whose elements are, whose properties are unknown, so to speak. It's not the best way of saying it, but no explicit properties. Now, what about the abstract sets themselves? So are these guys abstract in some sense or not? Okay. So now we have a different picture that we have to work with. And this is now the interesting question. So if we take this view of sets, of these abstract sets, seriously, and we want to work with them, what can we say about the collection of abstract sets? Okay, now, are they abstract? What are the operations we can perform with them? What kind of universe do they inhabit, so to speak? Okay, so now we have the cumulative hierarchy. We now know that these guys are all particulars, and this is fine for logicians as a foundational picture, but now we have a different conception of set, which is underlying the abstract working methods, okay, and model theory. And now we have to say, okay, the alternative is that we'll take these guys as our foundational picture. Now, what kind of picture do we get, and can we get a picture here? Okay. You see the movement I'm trying to push here. So here we are again. So in 76, you actually introduced this very clearly also. in your
what?
paper. You introduced this the same position, but with a twist. Okay?
Same position
As Fichet, in a sense.
Yes.
But with a little bit more detail
That's fair.
that he did. So here's what we find in your paper. So an abstract set X has elements, each of which has no internal structure whatsoever. So we don't have properties, individual properties. X has no internal structure except for equality. So here's the new thing. Fichet never said this, but it's probably was implicit in the way he was using these abstract sets. It has no internal structure except for equality and inequality of pairs of elements. And has no external properties save its cardinality. So now you're saying they have these sets themselves, well, they have one property, clearly it's cardinality. Okay, we can say that. The abstract sets have a property, they have cardinality. Still, an abstract set is more refined. Now, I like this, less abstract. Okay, I know what you mean, but well, have to know what does that mean here. That a cardinal number, in that it does have elements, while a cardinal number does not. Okay? So now we have these abstract sets. Well, they do have a property, at least they have a cardinality. Why? Well, there are functions between them. Okay? And now that's their basic rule. That's why we have this equality relation that is internal to them. If we apply a function, then we have to be able to say that A is different from B. But if we're allowed to do that, then we can define the notion of a bijection between sets, and that gives us the cardinality.
Can I ask one question about this quotation?
Well, you can have a bit.
Yeah, so while a cardinal number does not, so you resist the reduction of cardinal numbers to sets.
Sure. I mean, this is just an arbitrary convention to identify them with initial ordinals or even equivalence classes. I mean, it's
But that's not new.
that's
I'll show you
no,
that's
no.
From mathematics.
It's an abstraction.
It is.
Cardinality
Okay,
is
now,
abstract.
okay. We're getting through. So we want to do this. Okay, that's the point. We want to be able to say, well, the cardinality is something more abstract than these guys. We want to be able to say that.
Or even a more precise convention, which I like to cite, is that of Dana Scott, who says that the cardinal number is the set of all sets of least rank, which are bijected with. So it becomes a small rather than a proper class, but still not an ordinal or something like that. Just all sets of. So having precisely this rank in the hierarchy is used to specify an arbitrary choice of representatives for these.
But the hierarchy is, it's a nice thing. It has nice properties in some sense from a foundational point of view.
Yeah,
It allows you to prove certain
definite
things.
choice.
Nice.
the once and for all coordinatization of the universe.
Right.
You see Washington, D.C. is at the origin and so forth.
So, anyhow. So the equality predicate internal to sets is a new thing. So this is part now, it might be part of the theory. So here you just add the necessity of having mappings between sets, as I said. This is now the thing that we add. These abstract sets, we have to be able to have mappings between them. That's their real function, in a sense. Okay, here's one proposal. It's just, so if we want to, what is the minimal amount of information we need to be able to use the equality quality predicate within a set is, well, we need labels, for instance, to distinguish this element from that element. A is different from B.
A kind-test is the
Right.
Millian school.
Yeah. So aside from that, we don't care about the properties, but we need labels for the elements. So there are labeled sets. Let's call them that. Okay? That's all we need.
Yeah, but Jean-Pierre, I mean, there's of course a difference between epistemology and ontology, right? So if you say they do not have any properties, then Leibniz's principle of the identity of indiscernibles seems to go out the window.
No.
Yes.
They
yes.
have cardinality properties.
Yes,
The
no, I mean,
elements,
I
the sets
didn't, when in
themselves, not the
76,
elements.
I didn't know the language of dialectics, you see, but the point is this is an absolute sharp contradiction, that the elements of a set are indistinguishable and at the same time totally distinguishable by predicates, for example, by maps into a two-element set. There are enough maps into a two-element set to distinguish any two elements of any abstract. So it's a very sharp contradiction and hence productive.
It
Yeah.
contradicts
Not an-
Leibniz
not
and
an
contradicts
inconsistent-
Kant even worse. Because,
Well, it takes
Yeah.
Leibniz as one aspect
well, but this,
of the contradiction.
yes,
Yeah.
but this is, yeah.
Well,
But that's something we have to live with this foundation. We cannot claim to agree with everything Leibniz said.
No,
Well,
wait a
have
minute.
to- it's a source of life.
Wait. Here's another way to answer your question that you might find more appealing. I said, well, wait, okay. What Bill just says, that well, we have to look at the properties of a whole category of sets. Then it turns out there's a subobject classifier. And this guy does precisely what Bill just said.
Yeah.
This guy allows us to actually distinguish between these elements. So we do it in a certain way. We are able to distinguish them.
The Leibniz's principle is actually true.
Yeah, so it's a different way of implementing it, so to speak. And it doesn't rely on the fact that A is an individual with all these properties, and we have B an individual with all these properties, and then within we'll be able to find the property that A has and B does not have. Well, actually we will. Okay?
Well, we won't be
That's-
able to find it,
But the subobject classifier will allow us to make the...
but we can't distinguish the two classifying maps.
Yeah.
They're different, they are distinct, but without distinguishing features.
But I see, well, I maintain that even Boolean algebra is a certain amount of arbitrary
Sure.
choice because you see the actual subject matter of Boolean algebra is shuffling around partitions of a universe. You see. Take a fundamental example. People are partitioned into men and women. Now, who wants to say that women are the negative of men, you see? That would be, right? To decide that one is true and the other is false,
Right.
it conflicts with political correctness. but all the content of Boolean algebra emerges from the reshuffling of such partitions.
Okay.
So, but you see, okay, you say the sub-object classifier, but I mean, this point is somehow more elementary than that. It's simply that if you define a property to be a map to 2,
Right.
where 2 means an abstract element,
But-
then there are enough of these properties to distinguish. It was precisely Leibniz's principle.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so another thing I was hinting at, of course, is that recent discussions in the philosophy of quantum mechanics, right?
Okay.
So they're sort of the standard view has been for decades and decades that if you look at bosons or electrons and sort of similar elementary
Yeah.
particles, we have a clear violation of Leibniz's principle. But then there has emerged this view that this is predicated on a bit of a narrow-minded view of Leibniz's principle, because it says that sharing properties of two objects is sufficient to conclude they are identical, right? But for Leibniz, all relations were reducible to properties. Now, if you reject that, right, there is in mathematics, of course, zillions of relations that cannot be defined in terms of properties. So, the sufficient condition for identity should be sharing properties as well as being related to everything else in the same way as the other object does.
Okay.
Now, if you put it like that, then at least
Irreflexive relations will distinguish.
in quantum mechanics, you can actually now prove Leibniz principle.
Well, because it's a
In-
tautology now.
Yeah.
You can prove it in any field because it's a tautology now.
No. This is not a theorem of logic.
This entity differs from this one in being this, not that.
Oh no, but that is not allowed. So certain certain restrictions have to be imposed on which properties and relations are allowed.
Yeah.
For example, from a mathematical point of view, you would say that only those things are allowed that are automorphic invariant in the structure that you consider. You know, and this is a strong restriction because it means that lots of things. So hakeity, that turns it into a tautology, that is not allowed because that is not a genuine property at all.
Well, unless being this object is a property.
Yes, but that's the whole point. If
That's the whole
hakeity is not, if you don't have hakeity, you don't have this.
Having the
Yeah, okay, if you
Then-
don't have hakeity, then you rule out hakeity. I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that there are supposedly these candidates for things which do lack hakeity, of which
Yeah.
the bosons are an example. There are examples.
But now we're doing physics. If Leibniz clearly did not believe he was doing physics.
No,
when
but
he
the
propounded
medievals have the same
principle.
problem with fungibles, for instance.
Hmm?
This is an old.
You guys have lost me. I don't know
Anyway.
what this word is.
Well, it is another way to say that if you take a more relaxed view of Leibniz principle, there are no problems with Leibniz principle. But the narrow-minded view forces this contradiction. That's all.
And what's this word?
Hakeity, literally thisness.
Yeah.
Thisness.
And how do you spell it?
Haceccey, yes.
Ah,
The Latin for thisness. There's a fact of the matter of anything things that this is this and that is that. You know, which it is held that elementary particles, which are bosons, violate this. There are other candidates, for instance, purists.
Can the
The
Greeks be
medieval,
better
whole
than
medieval
that?
literature about this, about so-called fungibles. I mean, you know, if I pay $1,000 into my bank account by electronic transfer, I go to the bank the next day and ask for the $1,000 back, and they give it to me as a recredit of my account. I know absolutely no fact of the matter as to was this the very same $1,000 that I paid yesterday? In the days when you actually paid in bills, you could look at the serial numbers on the bills and say, no, I wanted the exact same $1,000. But if you just do like this, it's meaningless, obviously, to ask for exactly the same $1,000. So there is a kind of quite well developed tradition of discussion of these indistinguishables.
But if you want isomorphisms and invariance, elements of sets in the elementary theory of the category of sets have no isomorphisms and invariant properties because there are automorphisms taking any one to any other, any two to any other two, any three to any other three. These are all isomorphisms.
Which is just to say that sets, as they're determined as reflections in extension, do have hakeity. Insofar as...
No, I don't think so. It doesn't depend on, is hakeatos a property or not? We didn't talk about that. Not when we formulate the elementary theory of the category of sets. Not an interesting question.
No, and you really don't want to have that.
No, but what is interesting is that you have these automorphisms.
Yeah.
Sure.
All else says?
Yeah.
Okay, so long. Sorry, Jean-Pierre, to get back on track.
Okay. So this let me think where I was now. Has its own history and is closer to the introduction of the abstract approach. And by what I mean by introduction of the abstract approach is the historical introduction of the abstract approach. All right. So I claim that these sets with labeled elements play another role in abstract mathematics, and it is also this latter role that allows us to call them abstract. Okay, I'll explain that in a second. And I claim, this is an empirical claim, would have to be verified, it is probably this role that convinced mathematicians of the usefulness of set theory, and not the community hierarchy and its foundation of status. Okay? So I think that philosophers and logicians are really happy with viewing hierarchy and the axioms. It plays a really nice foundational role. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying it did play a very important role to clarify the important theorems about that. But at the same time, this notion of abstract sets, as I said, and I will repeat in a second, came to play a very important role also in model theory. Okay? and the abstract method. So when you start using the abstraction method, then you need, if you talk about a group as being defined by axes, and you want to talk about an arbitrary group, and you want to say that it is something, then the abstract sets are very handy. Yes,
It's about such an abstract set is a set with labeled elements. So you have another set of labels for the elements.
it's a different set.
Yes, but then you have a regress.
Yeah.
So why not an abstract set is a set of labels that you can use,
Okay, then that's
Can be used as labels.
can be used as labels. Yes.
Yeah.
I think this labeled set is an unnecessary redundancy.
right. Okay, so I don't need the sets. I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay, that's
One of the many uses.
Yeah. Okay. You can.
Perhaps one should introduce Mayberry's point, because he said this whole thing is actually due to the Greeks.
Right.
And he describes this example that you see some horses in a field. Well, immediately in their mind there comes into existence this abstract set, and the same thing, and a correspondence between the horses and the dots in the abstract. And then the cardinality is attributed to the abstract set, really, and hence indirectly to the set or collection of horses. And so probably, I don't know, I mean, somehow one is imagining finite sets here, but if you extend it to infinite sets, then it's really the same idea
Well.
in some sense. And moreover,
This is
it's due to Cantor. This, of course, is a whole other further discussion, but this was specifically introduced by Cantor and specifically totally ignored by all so-called set theorists, the very essence of Cantor's starting point.
Well, okay, that's an historical thing.
That's just-
How it shifted from Cantor.
But then can I just follow up a little bit on,
Sure.
on this point? So if we now take this seriously, that we start with a set of labels.
No, I'm not.
I mean,
Wait, so I'm not saying this now.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
The set with the elements with unknown properties. That's all we need.
yeah, but you
I
want
just suppose
you
you
want
want
to
to
I
label them, you
suggest-
know.
Well, I suggested that we might want to add labels just for make sure that what it means to write down that something is not the same as something else. But in fact, what we're doing is that we want to use the Topological classifier instead of enough mappings into that distinctions.
Which is an isomorphism there.
Yeah, so I don't want to
this
start
is-
with the label sets. It's like
Well, this is just an elementary example of the kind of structure that you can introduce in the category of abstract sets, namely choose one set called labels, and then label other sets by specific maps or commutative triangles, et cetera, so that the whole concept of labeling is can be modeled within this category. That's maybe
Okay.
the simplest example of.
I want to mention a few historical points that I think are interesting here. And I'll quote Leo Cord, related to these being abstract and the notion of identity in this context. So Frankel, way back to him, in his work in 1912, made something very strange from our point. And he was not the only one. And I want to underline this because it illustrates very well what happened between 1819 and 1930. Okay? There's this shift that sets as abstract particulars and this notion that we're trying to get at here, the notion of being an abstract set. Okay? So here's what Frankel did. Although this is a rather marginal issue in Frankel's work, it provides further indication of the ambiguous attitude of Frankel, as well as other mathematicians, and I'll give you one other example at least in a minute, towards the abstract formulation of algebraic concepts. The abstract concepts are defined once as operations on congruence classes, then as arbitrary sets endowed with an abstractly defined operation, and later on as a set of numbers in which equality is given the new interpretation. So look at the last part here. This Frankel starts with defined as operations on congruence classes, then arbitrary sets endowed with an abstractly defined operation, and then sets of numbers in which equality is given a new interpretation. And he does that in the same paper. Okay? Frankel began with a system of abstract elements endowed with an equivalence relation. This relation is called an equality, Gleichheit. The identity is only a particular case of an equality, but there may be other equalities defined on a domain. Furthermore, if any operation is defined on the elements of the system, then it is assumed that, regarding this operation, any two equal elements are to be considered as one and the same. Well, that's almost like Voevodsky univalent in some ways. But so here the point is, you see Frankel struggling with this idea that congruence classes can actually work as identities. And he's not quite sure how to work this out for ring theory. Okay, this is what he's trying to do in 1912. Now, since the elements of the set in question are completely abstract, what that means, again, Fréchet supposedly approached it. This assumption is in fact redundant in defining the ring. Nevertheless, it is easy to see its origin in Frankel's 1912 article. In the framework of p-adic numbers, the demand was actually meaningful, since p-adic numbers may be represented variously. And it was important for Frankel to stress the fact that these various representations should not be seen as different elements of the system. Consider.
wow.
Okay, so this is very interesting. It was mathematically motivated. And he felt the need to really make these nuances between congruence classes and when you had to use them and when you could ignore them. And he just didn't go all the way to say, well, ring is this, and then you interpret that by, well, anything that will satisfy this is a ring. Okay? So he doesn't go that far. We're in 1920. Now here's an interesting case, Orr. And we're in 1936. So that's not 1912. And Orr in his paper, that's his survey paper on how is it called? I forget now. I'll look it up. And he wants to go over what has been done in algebra. So in 1936, Orr includes the following definition in any algebraic system. And this is part of the definition of an algebraic system. It has to have that. So in an algebraic system, equality is usually defined and satisfies the following axioms. So there's no surprise here except for the first axiom. For two arbitrary elements, either A is equal to B or A is different.
Yeah, how do you formalize that?
Well, like that.
He just did. And then reflexivity, symmetry, sensitivity. Now here's the interesting part. Every such definition of equality, which is ordinarily not unique for a given system, constitute a division of the elements into classes. Okay? For us, look, 1936, reading this, we said, well, what was he doing then? Okay, so the algebraic systems, you have to specify an equality relation. And you have to specify, because there are these congruence classes, you want to treat them as they're abstract. And he doesn't do it, he just have to, he tells you how to do it. Okay? Interestingly enough, Orr himself, I've read this, and I was really surprised by this. He hesitated a long time before adopting the abstract in ring theory, because he was convinced that, and this is important for what I have to say in a minute, he was convinced that when you were actually doing algebra with polynomials, the polynomials had properties that you really had to take into account to do your mathematics. Whereas when you were doing ring theory, okay, so when you have polynomials, you forget about the polynomials and you do your ring theory. And he was convinced that that could not actually preserve the right information about polynomials that you needed to do the mathematics. It is only when he saw Noether's work and other works that he really realized that you could actually use these methods, that you were not actually forgetting properties, crucial properties, that you could do all the way. And then he just flipped, and he decided there was a program there of universal algebra, abstractly defined, that you could develop, and then he went into lattice theory. Okay? And that was his
There's a story about Orr that he chastised MacLean, saying, how could you possibly want to study logic? Well, you're not allowed to give a lecture on logic, something of that sort, because it's not part of mathematics.
Hodges at the conference, on the conference.
Who?
Hodges, Wilfred Hodges.
Ah,
He said in public, no, logic is a branch of mathematics.
yeah, yeah. But Aura had this.
Laura had a different right as
this
well.
view, yeah, the same.
Well, Henri Vail said that category theory was meta-mathematics. Okay, so in the practice of
What
mathematics,
struggles to avoid facing the point?
towards the end of the 19th century up to the 1930s, mathematicians had various theories, which each with significantly different entities and their own criteria on identity. Okay, so now I'm moving toward what I want to really introduce here is that a certain notion of what it is to be abstract. To move to the abstract sets was seen as taking faceless elements with an equality relation that served to distinguish these elements, not on the basis of properties belonging to a theory, but simply on labels. Okay, forget this on labels, but there was a mechanism. It was not explicit in the 1912s, 20s, and 30s. Okay, but it's just this idea that we don't need more than that. The properties satisfied by these elements were then added by a new theory. Okay, so here's the thing that I want to propose here of what it is to be abstract. Okay? And historically, now I have arrows here, but it's not really arrows, there are links. Okay, the arrows can go in a different direction depending on the historical case that you're looking at. All right? This is sort of a condensed version of, if you look at the history of group theory, ring theory, field theory, okay, and even metric spaces with Fichet, and topological spaces, and even category theory. The way mathematicians present their theory, how it works, there's something of that sort. Forget about the arrows, but in some cases, in lattice theory, for instance, it's more complicated. It's not arrows going in all the same direction. There's one of them to go in the other directions. And I'll reverse the arrows in a second. It doesn't really matter. But what we have, so I'll take here the case of group theory, because it's the simplest and the first one that was historically significant. Mathematically, is that you have here number theory and modular arithmetic, and Bruce would rise there. Okay, so you're talking about numbers. That's what I have you to keep in mind. And what I mean by this is that the criterion of identity of this theory is a criterion of identity for numbers. Then you have Galois theory. Okay, so you have permutation of proofs, so you have polynomials. Now, the criterion of identity there is clearly different from this guy's, because here you're talking about polynomials, and you want to know when two polynomials are equal. Okay, so in the theory you're doing, where group theory arises, you have a criterion of identity for polynomials that is what you're actually using. Then here you have geometry. Okay? And here you have a criterion of identity for geometric figures. Okay? So you're using that while you're doing your mathematics, and then you start applying operations on these figures. But the underlying criterion of identity is the criterion of identity for geometric figures. Okay? So this is, I think, very important. So in these three cases, you're actually working in a context with a certain criterion of identity for certain kinds of mathematical entities. And it would not, at first hand, come to your mind to use this criterion of identity for these guys. But these are geometric figures, these are numbers. It doesn't make any sense. What you notice, though, is that there are operations on these things that are similar in all three cases. And then you concentrate on these operations. And there's a step there when you start formalizing these operations themselves. Okay? Now this is the formal step. And it leads you to what are the properties of these operations. So you come up with a formalism that concentrates on these operations, and you build up a new theory. And here you find the common properties that apply to these guys, and these guys. But then you need a new criterion of identity for what you just selected for the operations. And once you have that, you have an abstract group. Okay? Now you go back and you interpret this, and when you go back, you're not using this criterion of identity now, or this one. If you go back to geometry, and you look at it from this perspective, you now look at the operations on these guys, and now you want to say, okay, when I apply this and this and this, it's not the geometric figures, it's not that are equal or unequal. You want to say, when I apply this operation twice, then you improve structure that you concentrate on.
Is it the same criteria? I mean, are the three cases identical, similar, or is the first one different than the second and the
They are
third?
different.
In the sense, no, I mean,
Okay.
that you have a criterion of identity for mappings. In the
Oh, no,
second
but
and the third,
that's
which
this
in
one.
turn,
That's this one. Okay, here you work in number theory.
Yes,
You have a criterion
number.
for
addition.
numbers.
in the second and the third, you have
Polynomials.
group structure arising from
The group
permutation.
structure is once you've seen this, then you go back. Then you look at the mappings in this context. There's a shift.
This does sound very reminiscent, if I could just say, of Piaget's notion about abstraction on reference
It is clearly related to it, okay, and also Cabet's,
Yeah.
right, in certain ways. Okay. But what is not clear in Piaget is the insistence of this guy and the difference. Okay, what I call here,
You mean that the group structure is not there
when you start
in the
out,
first place?
right. Historically, that's clear. Okay, that's my first point. Historically, we all agree with this. Okay, and here I want to really look at this from this perspective and the process that led mathematicians to actually get to the abstract point of view in the 1930s. Okay, but I think that the main elements that we have to focus on, because it's not clear, there's one element that everybody sees is that there's something common between them, and then we get the common properties, and we call that, since we forget a lot of stuff, we call that abstraction. Okay? Well, I want to say that we can be more precise than this. I think it is very important, in fact, that we have what I call a domain of significant variation. And historically, and this is just a fact, there has to be at least three. That's the way it goes. Historically, there are no cases where mathematicians considered seriously going the abstract way as long as they didn't have three examples. And if you look at some of the papers, I don't know, you look at Allenberg and MacLean's paper on category theory, how many examples do they have? Three. All the time. They have more than this, okay, but they need at least three. Group theory, well, you say, and this is Wussing who says that, it's not me, says, okay, group theory can give an abstract definition in 1854. It wasn't taken up by mathematicians.
Oh, I know a counterexample.
Okay, which one?
It is von Neumann's characterization of Hilbert space. At that time there was only little L2,
Right,
the space of sequences,
right.
and big L2.
Well, okay, that's an interesting case. I have to look at this one because von Neumann, when he really started out, he was convinced that he would have one vector space.
Yeah, up to isomorphism.
Yes, up to isomorphism. Okay, of course.
Yeah.
But then he realized that boom. Okay, I'm not sure that he got only two. Then afterwards, he said, "Oh God, we have more. We have another one."
No, but this fits your scheme perfectly, yeah.
Okay.
Because the Grundlagen der Quantenmechanik is one of the aims set out in the introduction is what is common in wave mechanics of Schrödinger and the matrix mechanics of the Göttinger physicists,
Right.
and they were in vehement clash.
Right.
Also about the underlying ontology.
Right.
One wanted a more continuous picture of the world,
Right.
the others wanted a more discrete, abstract picture of the world.
Right.
You see, and he was looking what is common in these two, hence Hilbert space.
Right.
Can I just make a brief intervention? I think because looking at the time constraints and seeing just as how far into his talk Jean-Pierre has done, I think we should actually call a close on interventions and questions during the talk and leave them to the end, just to allow him to finish and still leave time for Anders to speak before lunch.
Okay. So the important points are here: significant variation. And here, I didn't say that, but finding an appropriate criterion of identity for these two guys. Historically, this is also quite interesting, except for group theory for obvious reasons. Okay, the notion of isomorphism is just bang immediately because you look at permutation. applications. What was the problem with group theory was the notion of the homomorphism. I mean, for a long time, people looked at subjective homomorphisms all the time, and isomorphisms were right there. But other cases, it took a little while before they found out the right notion of identity isomorphism. Okay, for a topological space, it took 12 years before they clarified the difference between diffeomorphism and finally homeomorphism. It took 12 years. It's Kwiatkowski in 1922 actually introduced the right notion of homeomorphisms. In Hausdorff, in his first edition, it's not there. The notion of homeomorphism is not there. Same thing in category theory. When Algebraic and MacLean published their paper in 1945, they had the notion of isomorphism of categories. But as we know, that's not quite exactly what one needs to work with. And Grothendieck in 57 introduces the notion of equivalence of categories. But it takes that long. Okay? So what I call the extraction of the right criteria of identity comes afterwards. But to identify the right one is important. Why? Because once you have this guy, then you know what are the significant properties of your entities. So once Kwiatkowski introduces the notion of homeomorphism, Sapinski says, oh, so now the basic problem of topology is the classification of all topological spaces up to homeomorphism. And that becomes the big problem of topology. Before that, people use topology, and it's a clarification of analysis and stuff like that. But once you get that, there's suddenly a big problem of the field, and people start working on that. Okay? Once you have to do that. But once you have that, then you are in the abstract realm. Okay? Now, so the main point here is that the criteria of identity are incompatible with one another. This is very important for my point of view. You have to keep that in mind. So where do the abstract sets come in handy is once you've done that, okay, once you've gone to the abstract point of view, you have your theory, you have your criterion of identity, then it does make sense to say, oh, so what am I talking about? Well, what is a group? It's a set. Thought of abstractly now. Who's satisfying these problems? Okay? And now the notion of an abstract set comes in and plays an important role. So we reverse the process, so to speak now, and we use now this. So in topology, we say, okay, what's a topological space? Well, it's an abstract set with this structure, and here's the criterion of identity, and here's the problem we have to solve. Okay? But what doing this here, you see that there's something missing. In the previous picture, we did have a criterion of identity for these guys that was working internally. Now we forget about it. That's why we're really in this abstract realm, because we only apply this one. Okay? Only. And we've made a shift. Okay. So to be mathematically abstract first meant that the theory was the result of mathematical abstraction. Okay? For mathematicians in the 30s, this is what they mean. Group theory, field theory, ring theory, vector spaces were abstract in that sense. Okay? Not in the ontologically, whatever. And then Fréchet tries to clarify this, saying, well, the abstract sets are these, and that's why it is abstract, because we don't specify. We just impose a metric function, and this is a metric space, and it satisfies these things, and this is what means. Okay, but Fréchet, in his own exposition, he'll give you 8 different examples of spaces that he worked with that are significantly different. And he just says it doesn't make any sense at first to say that this is a space where the points are functions. And he says so explicitly, it doesn't make sense to say that. But I'll do it, because I'll just move to abstract sets with points. Okay? But in some cases there are functions, in other cases there are surfaces, and in other cases there are points. All right. So once the tools to construct an abstract theory were available, then things change. The axiomatic method and the universe of sets were forget them later. It's just that it became possible to define directly new abstract objects. So what I mean by this is that at first, historically, you have these domains of significant variation, formalization. You have your theory, you extract the criterion of identity. So there's a certain order, so to speak, although in some cases there was one case people were really interested in, and then suddenly you realize, oh, Here's another example, here's another example, here's another example, and then they realize that they can do all these things for all these cases. Okay? So now you can use the axiomatic method with these abstract sets to proceed abstractly. Okay? All right, so here's an informal characterization of what is happening here. Authority, together with an intrinsic criterion of identity, is mathematically abstract. So if it has at least 3 models, that's empirically verifiable. You have 2. If it has at least 2 models, then
One exception is nice.
which themselves have intrinsic criteria of identity. And this is important, the variation, because we want to be, it becomes abstract when we, at the same time, we use this criterion of identity for polynomials, but then we forget about it. Okay? And then students have to, I underline this, students have a real problem when you introduce them to group theory and stuff like that, and you give them distinctly different examples of these entities, but they're used to think about them with their criterion of identity. But you're telling them, look, forget that these polynomials have, like OR, forget that these polynomials have all these rich properties that you can use. Forget about that. We've been telling you a lot about how to work with them. Now we want you to shift and think about a different model, which is inherent, but works with a different criterion, which is the group theoretical. Okay? And this is a very important shift. And I think this is this variation is really crucial. So to work abstractly in this sense is to ignore the intrinsic criteria of identity of the elements of the models. In other words, these elements only have the elements that are, these elements only have the properties, that are attributed to them by the theory. And for that, sets with labeled sets, abstract sets, are just what we need. Okay? Or almost. Okay. So what is the criterion of identity for these sets? So we've said this. It is bijection. Okay? So now, the axiom of distinctionality is not true at all. What is the criterion of identity for an abstract set? Bijection. Okay. What about the totality of these sets? I'll get back to that. Now this is where the picture becomes, how do you develop this? How do we convince people that there's a natural picture here? Well, the natural answer is that they form a category. Okay? And now I would like to be able to say, oh, here's the elementary thing about the cumulative hierarchy. It's very easy, very clear. I would like to be able to say, well, here's the very natural answer for these abstract sets. It's so obvious, no, isn't it? They form a category. I don't know that I can say more than that to convince someone that that's got to be the answer if you accept this. Okay, so here's the point you were making. This goes back to 1893 by Weber in his book on proof. And I was really stunned by this, okay? Because he's entirely aware of the shift that he's making. It's very interesting. You have to go up and down all the time when you do this stuff. We can combine all isomorphic groups into a single class of groups that is itself a group whose elements are the generic concepts obtained by making one general concept out of the corresponding elements of the individual isomorphic groups. The individual isomorphic groups are then to be regarded as different representatives of the generic concept. And it makes no difference which representative is used to study the properties of the group. We're all familiar with this, but philosophically this is a very subtle point that from a foundational point of view we tend to just push to the side because we have this last picture where you say, well, an ordinal is not a type, it's the von Neumann. So you fall back under the concrete representation. There's a choice to be made there, and you'd rather fall back on that because then you use the exponential extensionality. But if you want to stick to the abstract point of view, then you're closer to that view. So well, there's the type, and here's it's not a homotopy type, it's just the type of a group. Okay? And this is the thing that we want to do. But of course, we have all these representatives that are linked by the isomorphisms. This is the criteria that we're going to use. We have to fall back on the representatives in some sense. But they abstract sets of elements. Now, here's the same point made by Max Keller in 1966. Okay? The objects of a category have but a tedious individuality. The group Z of integer is not the same set as of elements to different writers, or even to the same writer in different contexts, which I find rather funny. Okay. In a sense, it is only the isomorphism class that counts. And yet, we must at any instant be considering a definite set of elements in order that we may sensibly talk of homomorphisms. A group is not the same thing as a group type. Because they are, I'm not sure I understand what he means here, but because there are non-identical homomorphisms. How do you read the last sentence?
The type is the isomorphism class, right? And he says, yeah, so it's not the same thing.
As?
In particular, it's not a group.
Right. First one. Okay. So, but this is the same point that Weber is making. Now, as you know, Kelly here was introducing what Marquis says is the origin of the anafunctor idea. That's in that paper. That's what he says. Okay. But this is the idea that when you have a functor, you, in fact, don't want to send one object, any object isomorphic to it would work. Okay? So from the abstract point of view, you would want to have to be able to say that, okay? And to develop your theory accordingly. That leads to the structure that will arise, the hierarchy structure that will arise. Okay, so now the last part, homotopy types. Now, I want to claim that homotopy types, I'll just flash to you a diagram in a minute. And n-types are obviously abstract in the sense I just mentioned. Okay, so why? Well, homotopy types, as you know, if you look at instances of homotopy types, they are significantly different. And the criterion of identity for homotopy type is a new criterion. Okay, that was introduced by Huowitz in 1935. Okay, and at the end of his paper, he had 4 papers on homotopy theory. And in the first paper, he just introduces the homotopy groups. It proves the Huowitz isomorphism theorem. In the second paper, and he goes on, and at the end of the paper, he defines homotopy types there. So, well, I can go on in this, but now we get to homotopy zero types. And here the claim would be that they provide a natural route to abstract sets in the sense given above. Okay, so remember what these are. So these are just the homotopy types. There's pi 0, who's non-trivial, and all the others are 0. Okay. So they're just connected components that you contract, and these give you sets, discrete sets. Okay? What I usually get to that point after talking about homotopy types, then people say you can't be serious. This can't be what you have in mind. Well, in a way, I do want to argue, and here you might not agree with me, and it would be interesting. I do want to connect this with basic work in cognitive science. There are strong evidence that very, very early on, we do understand what it is to be spatially connected and contractible. Okay, not formally, of course, but it is something we have to have in order to make sense of our environment. Now, what I would like to do is say, ha! You guys thought that the empty set was easy to get. Okay. I claim that these guys are just as natural. The zero types. Okay. That's the problem. Say, well, humans seems to be born with a capacity of detecting the property of being connected. Both, and the experiments here are clear. They have done experiments for spatial components and experiments for temporal components. And in both cases, it seems to be something that is hardwired, that we detect very quickly what is spatially connected and what is temporally connected. We are also very good at detecting causal chains. Okay? So events are connected. So there's a path that is also there. Okay? So that would be one of the things that we might. One of the reasons why I brought up the logical aspect of set theory here is this, well, it's so easy because in the language, the antiset we get by this predicate, x is different from x, we get the antiset. So you see, it's used there at least to convince us that the cumulative hierarchy is something very elementary that we can explain to even anyone who understands equality and inequality will understand these things. Then Howard said, well, okay, it's combinatorics, but well, it's quite easy. You don't have to be. Now here the thing is, well, homotopy zero types is something very easy to explain. You don't have to do homotopy theory to do that. That's the point. Usually I go over homotopy theory and then blah, blah, blah. And then I get to the point, as Steve has just done here, saying, oh, I have homotopy theory. And lo and behold, we do get set theory at the zeroth level. Okay? But then people sort of say, you can't be serious. You have to go to explain this whole thing of very complicated machinery of higher dimensional homotopy types, and then you just tell me that at the zeroth level we get sets, and that's supposed to be your picture of the foundations of mathematics. Okay, and then Pfefferman's argument is, you can't be serious, this is too complicated from a cognitive standpoint, you won't understand things. So a set is now a set of connected components. If needed, we give a name. This is the labels coming up again. Forget about that. Thus, the geometric approach to sets yields directly. Okay, here's the connection I want to make. The connection I want to make is that, well, for the abstract conception of sets, we need a way to bring them in. Okay? Well, here's a way to bring them in. Because we have these connected components that we contract, and that's it. That's an abstract set. Okay? You don't have individuals that are specified there in any way. You don't have specific individuals, elements. It's just a contraction of a connected component. And that gives you a discrete set. That's all you need.
Well, you
That's
shouldn't say
basic.
contraction.
Well, sorry?
Contraction means something else.
Okay, what did I say?
I mean, a contractible space is simply connected. It's connected and simply connected. Don't say contraction.
Yeah, okay. All right, you're right. All right. Okay, sorry. You're right. Technification. But you know what I meant.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes I like to go all the way.
Mhm.
So what is more, the notion of homotopy type provides us with levels of abstraction that naturally underlies the mathematical notion of abstraction. So now, the articulation that I would like to do here is that, okay, now we know what it is to be abstract. Okay? We can use that to introduce the other levels. So we have the sets, these form, and this is the tricky part that is hard to bring about and convince people that, well, okay, so these abstract, what is these abstracts? What are they? Well, they form a category and they form a totals. Okay? And we could go higher than that. So why are there levels of abstractions? So I mentioned this yesterday. Already in the 1970s, Peter Freud showed that the category, the homotopy category of top, is abstract in his sense. So in his sense, that's what it means. Okay? To be abstract for Peter Freud in 1970 means there's no faithful functor from a show top set. So informally, what this means is that these homotopy types and the morphism between them cannot be represented, so to speak, as sets and functions between them. Okay? And it gives a proof why you cannot have this representation. Okay, so there is a clear signal. So here's a proposal that I want to make to you here of what it means to be least as abstract as for two theories. Okay, here's one formulation. I don't know whether it holds any water. In fact, I think it does. The intuition is very. I'll give you another formulation that is more compact. So I said that the theory T1 is as least as abstract as the theory T2. So this is the category of models of the theory, and this is the category of models. Second, so there's got to be a connection between them. Okay? You're going to have two categories and they're not related at all. So it's got to be a function. From the first one to the second one. And then for all objects in the first one, I'm not sure about all functors here, but I think it has to be. There's a monomorphism between the class of isomorphisms here and this one. The idea is very simple, in fact, is that here we have, if these are taken as being abstract, this is the group order of identities. Okay? And this means that you can actually have any isomorphism here is one there, but there are more here. Okay? One standard example of this would be metric spaces and topological spaces. This would just say more precisely what I think is reasonable to say that topological spaces are more abstract than metric spaces. Why? Well, any metric space is a topological space, but you have to show how it is. There's a construction. And any isomorphism here between metric spaces is certainly homomorphisms. But as topological space, you'll have more homomorphisms. What does that mean in another sense? It means that here there's more variation.
Should it be a 2 in the second?
Sorry?
On the ISO CT, should that be a 2?
Oh, yes, you're right. It's a 2. It's not a 1.
So I think it's more clear if you just drop the two logical quantifiers. I mean, it's a definition of when does a functor f demonstrate that, blah, blah. And it just means that you get faithfulness when you restrict to the groupoids.
Okay.
It's a property of a functor f. You don't want to say there is a functor or for all functors.
Well, I want to say that there's a connection between the categories. There's got to be a way of linking.
Yeah, so, but this is the definition of what kind of a connection you mean.
Right.
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's with all functors. It's just
Well, I
one
don't.
functor has this property, and that's
There's another way of formulating it. I think is better, which is better. I'll give it to you in a second. So.
no, I think that was very good. It wasn't wrong. To putting the quantifiers into it.
Right. Okay. So a theory T2 is more abstract than a theory T1. If T1 is as least as abstract as T2, and T2 is not as least as abstract as T1, I think that would be equivalent to the claim that there's no epimorphism here. Okay? That's what we want to say. I think that the most succinct formulation is in terms of group points. Okay? And in a sentence, one would say that a T2 or T1 is as least as abstract as T2 is if the underlying group point of the category of models is a strict subgroup point, or not a strict, is a subgroup point of the category of models of T2. And the intuition here is that the more isomorphisms you have, the more variation you have, and this is meaning that this is more abstract. Okay? This is what it means. And this is a purely, in my mind, so this is a purely mathematical definition, but it reflects an epistemological element that I think is important. Okay?
But you
Why?
can't quantify over the functors.
Sorry?
You can't quantify over the functors. Take the functor that takes every metric space to the singleton topological space. It exists, it's a functor.
Okay.
And
That won't work.
it produces it produces an
Okay, so if I
epimorphism.
formulate it in terms of group points,
Yeah.
that's the main idea, but I thought it was more, in a sense, intuitively more.
But then even still you have to know which functor is going to compare them.
No, it's you're defining a new notion of structure here. You have two categories and a functor between them that has certain properties, namely restricting to the groupoid parts becomes faithful. So that's a whole more complex structure than a single category. It is. So once you get that clear, then you might start quantifying, but
Yes,
put the
it's
quantifier.
it's insisting on the use of quantifiers, which is getting
But
away.
actually, I like the idea that your functor is actually defined for all morphisms.
Right.
It's not just that it's, again, exists on the underlying groupoids, but it's defined for all morphisms with this special property when you restrict it. It's very intriguing, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it actually
Okay.
works.
But okay, so I have to look at the details. But I do think that that this is the idea that we're trying to capture. It just makes sense to say that being more abstract is precisely that. And then we have,
And abstraction.
okay, we can make claims like the theory of topological spaces is more abstract than the theory of metric spaces. And then we can also claim that the theory of abstract sets is more abstract than any, well, for instance, algebra or algebraic structure. Because when you fix, and if you define an algebraic structure, then you'll fix some of the elements, you'll have less isomorphism. If you go to the sets, then you'll get more isomorphisms there. So this is the underlying idea. And it is, from an intuitive standpoint, it makes sense, because if you fix, for instance, the unit of the group, that means that within all these elements, there's an element that has a problem. And so it's not as abstract as the underlying abstract set. Because the underlying abstract set, all the elements are equal, so to speak. Okay? So if we impose structure, suddenly you might impose distinctions between the elements that you don't want to make, where when you consider them as being purely abstract sets. Okay? So you get that image. So when we
I
get
think
to
you could prove as a theorem, but I used to tell my students that there's one thing that's more abstract than the category of abstract sets. And that's the two-element Boolean algebra, which distinguishes, can be directly related to distinguish the empty set from all the non-empty sets.
right.
So I think you could probably actually prove that with your definition. That that's
Okay, when we get to
heuristic.
Algebraic category theory and homotopy theory, things change. Okay, why do they change? Now here, what I talked about earlier is the underlying groupoid and one groupoid. Okay. Now, if we go up, then we introduce distinctions between the criterion of identity. It's no longer isomorphisms that you want. If you have a category of categories, then you will have to introduce equivalences, and then the criterion of identity changes. So this ought to be, or it ought to be possible to show that we're getting higher in the abstraction. It's a higher level of abstraction. Okay? And I think that it makes sense. And that was, in a way, makes it more difficult. So remember, for instance, the homotopy equivalence. So when we have isomorphisms, this is just an equality. Now, this is a homotopy that is done here, and then the homotopy. And there, of course, there are many here. Okay? Now, doing this, now you're introducing another level of variation, which was not present before. Okay? So we might, at this level, we didn't find that in literature, but we could have had someone like Orr saying, oh, but here, wait a minute, we have to decide which one will be taken as being the right homotopies that will work as identities here. Okay? And when we work with isomorphisms, there's only one, it's natural. Now we have a whole bunch of guys doing this, and we'll treat them as, so to speak, identities. Okay? But now there's another level of variation that is introduced. And of course, when you go one level up, then there's another level of variation that is introduced. And when you introduce variations like that systematically, you're introducing these levels of abstractions. Okay? So one of the crucial ingredients here is that this equivalence relation does not respect the criterion of identity for abstract sets. For instance, the real line bar is homotopically equivalent to the one-point space. Okay, so well-known fact. So here, what I mean by this is that for abstract sets, we have the notion of bijection, which was the real working notion. Here, and of course, this is not a bijection at all, but it's a criterion of identity. And here the variation is much bigger. Okay? So this is really hard to work with at first when you start looking at this from a purely abstract point of view. So let me say it this way. So homotopy types require that we go up in the hierarchy of abstraction. Homotopy 1 types are modeled by groupoids. Homotopy 2 types are modeled by cross modules. This is going back to Whitehead and Klein. And homotopy 3 types are modeled by weak groupoids. This is not Anderscock, it's your son. So it's way out in their paper. Okay. The same hierarchy will show up in the universe of abstract sets, and totalities of abstract sets form toposes. Okay? Now, this is the picture one wants to develop and use to convince that there's an alternative notion here at work of sets. Okay? That the standard conception in the foundations of mathematics was based on the notion of the cumulative hierarchy, with these sets being abstract particulars with the axioms of extensionality. Now, the alternative picture takes the notion of an abstract set, as expounded by you, seriously, and wants to build a picture of mathematics based on that. Okay? The goal would be that it would be just as natural, quote unquote, whatever that means, than the cumulative hierarchy, and that theories would be proved there that are as significant as the ones we got in the cumulative hierarchy. So universes of toposes then would form two categories. Since we want to be able to model homotopy 3 types, we'll have to go up to the weak 3 categories. Okay, so if we're forced here by these homotopy types to go higher up. So, in conclusion, and I'm sure I've taken too much time, but it's hard to tell because of all these.
Well, you've had a lot of interventions and questions.
Homotopy types seems to be too complicated to be genuine foundational entities. Okay, so this is the discussion I always have when I introduce these things, and I have to explain to logicians what a homotopy type is, what a homotopy group is, and then we have to explain what a homotopy n-type is, and then we go for an hour over this, and then I end up trying to convince them that this makes a whole lot of sense, and that you can actually use this to understand a different foundational picture. They just go, they've got to be nuts. Okay? But we need something similar or analogical to the cumulative hierarchy. So this is the goal. Okay? This is something that we want to be able to use and develop. And I do believe that at this stage, homotopy 0 types are simple and easy to understand. Okay? You have to start there. And for those, I think you don't have to do homotopy theory. Not the serious homotopy theory, as it developed historically and in its practice. So we have to reconstruct, so to speak, this universe, starting from scratch, basic principles that are not algebraic topology, so to speak. So it is the next steps that are still lacking, I think. That's what I think. And these steps have to be motivated by topos theory and high-order topos theory. In some ways, you have to make sure that at the zero level, everything is elementary and clear, but then you have to, the structure that these guys have, it's not ZF. It's the axioms for our topos. Okay? So this has to be motivated. I mean, for us, it's rather obvious, but it's hard to convince others how these come naturally. I mean, I just experienced that yesterday with Janis Moshtarakis. He just asking, so would you be able to do this? Sure, yeah, this is how you would do it. Is this as natural as what we do in the cumulative hierarchy? I said, well, if you look at it this way, I don't know what you'll think, but here's how we think. That's the way of doing it. So here's what I have to say on this topic. Hopefully